Hey, Sherry,
Yeah.
remember we were looking for some kind of an opening for our awning segment?
Yeah.
Hey, I just wrote a song. Tell me what you think. Well, where, oh, where is my awning tonight? All I did was go into town. I came back from the store and thought it would be there, but up come the wind and it was gone. What do you think?
That was very nice, Timmy. Now tell the nice folks about the awnings.
I thought that was pretty good. There are literally thousands of awnings, bent, twisted, and blown off each year due to improper usage or setup. I've replaced hundreds of awnings, but the one I remember the best is Mr. Miller. Well, Mr. Miller, he calls me up one morning and says, Tim, I hear you do awnings. And I go, yes, sir, I do. He says, could you come over and have a little look at a problem I got? And I said, sure, I could be over there probably 5, 6 o'clock this afternoon. How'd that work? And he said, well, I greatly appreciate it if you get over a little earlier. He says, I got some errands to run. And he says, I can't get out of my RV. Oh, what? Okay. So I went roaring over there. He literally had 50 or 60 gallons of water billowed up in this awning that had collapsed in front of his door. I had to cut him out, drain the water first off, then cut the awning to get the old boy out. So Mr. Miller didn't set his awning up properly. He didn't slope it down to allow for the rain that we had that night before. So you can see the importance of setting up an awning properly. We're going to walk you through. We're going to go through window awnings first, slide awnings, and then we're going to show you the basic setup of awnings. We're going to start with window awnings. There's not much to them, as you can see. They're spring-loaded, and all you have to do is pull them down and hook them into the hole in the strap. Some come with multiple holes so that you can leave them up a little or pull them right down. Next are slide awnings. Their purpose is to keep the dirt and debris off the top of your slide, so when you retract it, it doesn't bring a bunch of trash into your coach. They can also act as a shade in the hot weather. There's not much to them. They too are spring-loaded and automatically roll up as the slide comes in. Some have a safety arm on them to prevent the fabric from unraveling at high wind or while traveling. I'm not going to insult your intelligence by explaining the automatics. The hardest part may be locating the switch. We're now going to show you how to properly set up a standard awning. Most awnings work on the same principle. For demonstration purposes, we're going to use the A&E 9000. They're very popular and very simple. The first step is to release the travel locks. There are a few different styles, and yours may look similar to one of these, but they all serve the same purpose, to hold the arms tight against the coach while going down the road. Next, pull the release mechanism downward to the rolled down position. Again, there are different styles such as this one. With your awning rod, pull the center strap firmly until the awning is fully extended. Next, go to the rafter support and slide it up the arm until it locks into place. Apply downward pressure to the rafter support so the fabric becomes snug and tighten the support nut. Then, repeat that step on the other side. Now that the awning has the appropriate tension, we have to lift the awning arms upward to finalize the setup. Do this by grasping the spring-loaded lever. While pushing it upward, raise the awning arm to the desired height. Now, slide your strap to one side and wrap it around an awning arm so it's out of the way. Personally, I like to put it furthest from the door. It's a good idea to slope the awning to one side like this, to allow water to run off in case of rain. Remember to watch the clearance between the door and the awning. If the awning's too low, it may come in contact with the door and cause fabric deterioration over time. Okay, it's time to go. Let's put it back. Bring your awning strap back to where it's readily accessible to the release mechanism. You're now going to have to bring the awning arms down. The weight of these arms is not overwhelming, but it may be somewhat difficult for some people to lower alone. Just remember to grab the larger part of the arm firmly to prepare for the weight. The arm lever is spring-loaded, so be sure to push it up all the way and gently lower the arm. Loosen the tension on the fabric, release the upper lock, and slide the rafter support down to its travel position. Repeat this step on the other side. Now hold the valance or the strap firmly in one hand and the top of the arm in the other, and flip the release mechanism to the roll-up position. Get ready for the tension. Slide the strap to the center of the tube and with a hand-over-hand motion slowly guide the awning to its travel position. Then, set your travel locks and tighten the rafter support nuts. Good going, now you're set for travel. The first thing I need to explain about electricity is that in the wrong hands it can be deadly. If you don't know what you're doing, don't understand how it works, leave it alone. Get some help from someone who is qualified and that really knows. I was called out to look at a problem a lady was having with her trailer. She'd moved her RV into the backyard of her daughter's place and had a neighbor put a 30-amp receptacle on a post for her to plug in. This neighbor thought the plug was 220 volts, like the type you see on a dryer. As you can see, they look somewhat similar, and he wired it in that way. When the lady connected the RV to the post, the TV, microwave, and other appliances that were plugged in were destroyed, and it blew the circuit breaker in the breaker box. Now, not knowing what the neighbor had done, I reset the breaker, and as soon as I touched the trailer, which was metal, I was immediately lit up like a Christmas tree. Thank the stars it was me that touched that coach and not her. It could have been deadly. Now, if you have working knowledge of AC and DC power, you might find the first few minutes of this boring and a little bit long-winded, but be patient. I think if you understand a little about the electrical system on your unit, you'll feel more comfortable and confident. Also, you might be able to save some money on repairs. Most problems can be solved or found with a test light, a hairdryer, and some common sense. We'll start the demonstration explaining the difference between AC and DC power. AC power, or alternating current, is the same stuff you have in your home. It runs your TV, microwave, lights, and so on. We will continue to call this AC power. DC power, or direct current, is the power you have in your automobile. It powers the starter, lights, ignition, and basically everything in the vehicle. We will call this DC power. RVs have both power systems in them, and I believe it's important to understand a little bit on how the two interact. In the early years, RVs were intended to dry camp, meaning that most appliances ran off propane and the few lights they had ran off the batteries or DC power. Well, RVs are bigger and fancier and they have more toys in them, but the concept is still basically the same. They still are designed to run out in the backwoods and they need DC power to run them. Did you know the fridge in your unit must have DC power to run, even on propane? They have a little brain box or a module in them that is powered by the battery to make them work. Same with the furnace. It's DC power and of course propane. Same goes for the water heater. If you have the DSI model, the direct spark ignition, the type you just flip the switch. Most, if not all, lights are DC powered, and when the battery goes dead, nothing works. If equipped, when your tow vehicle or motorhome engine is started, the alternator charges the batteries, but they will never get fully charged that way. I'll explain that later. That's why we have converters. That is converters with a C, not inverters with an I. People get the two confused all the time. I will explain inverters later on as well. Converters convert AC power to DC power. Quite simply, a converter is a battery charger. When you plug in your unit, the converter charges your batteries and runs the 12-volt or DC-powered accessories. Converters are designed to be plugged in for long periods of time or short stays. They have a voltage regulator in them, and if working properly, will not overcharge the batteries, but will top them right off. Understand that batteries need a long, steady charge to bring them back to full strength. So, let's say you're planning to go into the woods for the long weekend. It'd be a good idea to plug your unit in for a week before going. That way, the batteries would be fully charged, and if you use the system conservatively, you could make it through the entire weekend. An inverter works in reverse. It takes DC power and turns it into AC power. They come in different sizes and shapes, and if you have one of the bigger ones, you can watch TV, cook in the microwave, and so on. They're a great thing to have, but they have to be set up properly. They require a great deal of battery power, and they are quite expensive. If you do a lot of dry camping, they're great. But if you go to full hookup RV parks, you don't need them. They make AC power where there is none. Let's assume you have a travel trailer, no generator, and no solar power. If you are a dry camper, batteries are the heart of the system. Without them, the RV is dead. So it's important to learn how to make them last as long as possible. There's a lot of information on batteries, but the only things you really need to know is amperage draw, reserve capacity, and how they affect you. First off, let's talk about DC voltage. Think of volts as measurement of strength. The higher the number, the stronger the system. 12 volt, 24, 36, and so on. On RVs, we use only 12 volts. It's very important to remember that. If you think of amperage draw, or amps, as the speed that electricity goes through the wire, it's like a speedometer. It's a way of measuring the speed of the current going through the system. The higher the number, the faster the electricity is flowing through the wires. One light bulb might use 1.5 amps, 2 bulbs, 3 amps, and so on. While we are talking about amps or amperage, let's touch on fuses for a minute. They come in different sizes and shapes. Fuses work like a speed zone. If the system only needs up to 15 amps of electricity, a 15 amp fuse is installed. For whatever reason, say the wire is shorted to ground or the system is overloaded, and the amperage exceeds the fuse amount, it burns out. You see, when electricity passes through a wire, it creates heat. The higher the speed or amperage, the more heat is created. That little wire in the fuse is just like my wife. It's designed only to take so much, and then it blows. If something quits that is DC powered, the first place you should go to is the fuses. Depending on your coach, you might find fuses all over the place. You should make a point of knowing where they are and what they do. If yours are the ATO type, like these, you can probe them with a test light to see if they're good or not. I like this method the best. Make sure you have a good ground and probe both ends of the fuse. Fuses can look fine, but they can be burnt out. Here, I found a bad one. Glass fuses can be tested the same way. Just touch the tip on the metal part and check both sides. And remember, never use a test light on AC power. It's for DC or battery power only. Now here's some neat devices called circuit breakers. They can be installed in place of a fuse. The nice thing about them is that if there is a problem and the speed limit is broken or the amps have been exceeded, they blow just like a fuse. But after they cool down, they automatically reset themselves. If the problem is a once-in-a-while thing like a power surge, everything goes back to normal. But if it's something serious, it will continue to blow and reset and will protect the system until it is fixed or the breaker wears itself out. Remember that the system that you have in your RV is a 12-volt system. Whatever combination of batteries you put in your RV, it must always come out as 12 volts DC. Now, what do I mean by that? I'm going to explain parallel and series hookups and at the same time explain reserve capacity. Throughout the years, I've seen people hook up batteries wrong and set fire to their campers. When you jump or boost one vehicle with another, you hook positive to positive and negative to negative. That is a parallel hookup. When we put more than one battery on our units, we do the same. We hook them in parallel. This serves two purposes. It keeps our system 12 volts, but best of all, we double the reserve capacity. Reserve capacity is how we rate or guess the time a battery will last. Let's say you have a 12-volt battery that has a reserve capacity of 175 minutes. In theory, the battery will last for 175 minutes at a 25 amp draw. Now if, and not likely, you had 16 lights lit at the same time, and each light draws 1.5 amps, your battery would be dead in 175 minutes. Now, if you hook two 12-volt batteries each with 175 reserve capacity in parallel, you get 12 volts and 350 minutes reserve capacity. You see, the voltage stayed the same, but the reserve doubled. Let's add another one. Now we have 12 volts and 525 minutes reserve. Do you see what's happening here? As long as the batteries are hooked in parallel, the voltage stays the same, but the reserve increases. Important to mention, never mix reserve capacities and sizes of batteries. That means if you have, for instance, 175 reserve and 150 reserve, don't put them together. They will fight each other and cause problems. Okay, that's the 12-volt batteries. Now, we're able to put 6-volt golf cart batteries in our RVs. They have incredible reserve capacity, but the clincher is we have to buy two of them. and that's why we have to talk about series hookups. Remember when I said whatever combination of batteries we come up with, it must always come out as 12 volts? Here's what I mean. Let's say we have two 6-volt batteries. If you take them and hook them the way we did the 12-volt ones, we would still have 6 volts. Well, that won't work. But if we hook the batteries in series, we will get what we need. Here's how we do that. With the batteries close to each other, a jumper wire is put between one of the positive posts of one battery and the negative post of the other. Notice that leaves a positive and a negative post free. We've just made a 12-volt battery system with two 6-volt batteries and a reserve capacity of 480 minutes. Unlike the parallel system, when you hook in series, you double the voltage, but the reserve stays the same. If you need more reserve capacity, you need to hook another set of batteries in parallel. Now you have both hookups involved. This is called a series parallel hookup. We now have a 12-volt system with a 960-minute reserve capacity. And that's why a lot of people do this. This system takes up a little more space, costs more, but you get 260 minutes more reserve capacity, or 4.5 hours more. That can make a big difference when you're dry camping. Now, let's move on to AC power. Remember my story about the lady getting her power hooked up wrong? AC can be deadly if in the wrong hands. If you don't know what you're doing, get help. The AC power in your coach is the same as what you use in your home. The one little difference is the GFI, ground fault interrupt, or GFCI, ground fault circuit interrupt. Most houses have them in the kitchen, bathroom, and other places, and so do RVs. The difference may be that in RVs, several other receptacles can be tied into one GFI. They're just a super sensitive circuit breaker. They're designed to pop or blow quicker than the circuit breaker in the panel. They're a great device, and I'm sure they've saved many lives, but if you don't know about them, they can cause you some grief. Now, I've been called out several times to find out one side of the customer's coach has no power, only to find they didn't check the reset button on the main receptacle, like this one. It's not uncommon to find the kitchen receptacle tied into an outside plug, and when it rains, the GFI pops, or a curling iron pop the one in the bathroom, and the TV won't work. I've seen as many as 5 GFI circuits on large motorhomes. You should find all of yours and find out what they run. You can test to see if they're working by pushing the test button, and the reset button should pop out. All the receptacles related to that GFI should stop working. Push the reset button and everything should come back on. If not, get someone qualified to look at it. Your circuit breakers are the same as the ones in your house. Again, I've seen people not resetting them properly. Don't be fooled. Sometimes they look okay, but the only way to know for sure is to move them all the way to the off position and then to the on. I just wanted to touch on the different types of AC power services that RVs use. Most of the units come out with a 30 amp service like this one. If you're not at an RV park and need power, you can adapt to what most of us call a 15 amp adapter and plug into your house. Do you remember me talking about amp draw in the DC power section and that more amps create heat? The same principle applies with AC power. When you use the 15 amp adapter, you need to limit the amount of power you use. You shouldn't use your air conditioner. It can draw as much as 20 amps. Your toaster can draw as much as 15 amps by itself, and so on. If you overload the system, it will most likely blow the breaker in the place you are plugged into and literally melt the 15 amp adapter. If you have a larger trailer or motorhome, you might have a 50 amp service that looks like this. They're designed to allow you to do just about anything in your coach. You might be able to run both air conditioners, do a load of laundry, watch a movie, and make popcorn all at the same time. But in some RV parks, they're hard to find. So we have adapters that bring us down from 50 amp service to a 30 amp service, and again to a 15 amp service. Just keep in mind that every time you adapt down, you have to limit the power usage. Another thing to remember is to use the shortest extension cord possible. There's a thing called voltage drop that would make me drag this thing on more than I already have. Trust me, if you can use a 25-foot cord instead of a 100-footer, do it.
There's 2 types of freshwater systems on your RV. One is the portable water system, and the other is the city water hookup.
The portable water system is just that. You take water with you in a holding tank, and the water is delivered to you by being pumped through the lines. The pump might look like this one. It draws water from the tank, and it has a switch in it that shuts down the pump when it reaches the set pressure, usually about 40 psi. It's designed to give steady, continuous flow. Also, we think it's one of the best tools to use in detecting water leaks. Water leaks can be devastating to an RV if not found and repaired quickly. Every now and then, we turn our pump on and sit and listen. The pump will pressure up, and if everything is okay, then it will be silent. If there's a problem, it will kick in and out, and how often it does will depend on how serious the leak is. So if you're camping and the pump is kicking in and out for no reason, you have a problem and need to have things checked out. This only works if you're not hooked up to city water. When you are, in most cases the city pressure is greater than the preset pump pressure, and the pump will not run. You should drain your tanks when you're done camping, and if you go to your favorite RV parts store, they'll show you different types of additives you can use to keep the tanks clean and fresh. The city water system is really quite simple. Make sure you have a non-toxic hose, and we always use a regulator. Some RV parks have incredible pressure and can damage the lines in your unit. We like to put the regulator on the tap. That keeps it out of the way so no one can run into it and cause us a bunch of problems. Hook up the hose to the regulator and run a little water out of it to clean it out. Bugs and dirt can clog that strainer. Make sure the strainer is clean and attach the hose to the unit. Turn it on and check for leaks. You don't need the pump when the city water is hooked up. You want to use the park water, not the water in the freshwater holding tank. If you have the type of system that allows you to fill your freshwater holding tank from the city water fill, that's wonderful, but you have to be careful. You must use them properly. And, of course, Tim has a story about that.
One afternoon, a lady calls me up and she says she's having problems with her slide. When I got out there and I walked into her trailer, I had that feeling that something just wasn't quite right. You know that feeling? I spent about an hour looking it over and finally I figured it out. I don't know if it was a design flaw or someone from the factory just never really thought it through. But what happened was, she hooked up her city water hose and turned it on thinking she was going to get water. But she had the valve set on city water fill. Most tanks have an overflow or an overfill spout on them designed to spill the water onto the ground when they're full. This one had about a 1/4-inch hose to do that. The park she was at had awesome pressure and volume. It filled the tank so full, it blew up like a balloon, lifted her floor, and bent the rails on her slide. When you hook up and turn on the water, listen. If the water's running and you don't know why, find out.
The moral of this story? Get to know how things work on your coach. This is good advice on any topic.
We've decided to combine furnaces and air conditioning in the same section because there are very few owner-serviceable parts on them. Safety is always important. With the exception of the few things that I'll show you, only qualified people should work on furnaces. I want to put your mind at ease. The furnaces of today are very safe and have a number of devices built into them that will shut them down if something goes wrong. And that's what we want, right? Some furnaces are manual light and some are automatic. Let's start with the automatics. Depending on the type of thermostat you have, you simply turn it on and set the temperature. If you're having troubles, there are a few things that you can check. If you can't solve the problem, you can at least tell your RV tech what your findings are, and it may help him track down the problem a little more quickly. A non-functioning furnace usually reacts in one of two ways. It does absolutely nothing or it blows cold air. If it does nothing, make sure the thermostat is on and set properly. Something I see quite often on these less complicated thermostats, like this one, people forget to flip the on-off switch. Oh, by the way, make sure it has one. Sometimes they get broken off and are stuck in the off position. If the switch is okay, try moving the temperature lever back and forth a few times. The contacts can get dirty and sometimes this helps. If it still won't work, we need to check the power supply. All furnaces have fuses, likely located in the fuse box. Don't rely on the labels that mark your fuses to find the correct one. Test all of them. I recommend using a test light. Remember I showed you how to use one in the electrical section? First, find a good, clean ground and probe both sides of the fuses as I'm showing here. If you get a light on both sides of all the fuses, chances are the power supply to your furnace is good and the problem lies elsewhere. If you find a bad fuse, replace it and try to restart your furnace. If the fuse blows again, you definitely have a problem and need professional help. There is one exception, the Hydroflame furnace, the one with the fold-down door on the outside of your coach. It has a circuit breaker that you simply push in to reset like I'm showing you here. This rocker switch is used for the service people to disable the furnace when they work on it. If you hear your furnace running and it's blowing cold air, check your propane tanks. Make sure the valves are open and light all the burners on your stove just to make certain your LP system is working properly. From there, go to your thermostat and shut it off. Wait about 10 seconds and then turn it on again. Sometimes the little brain box inside the furnace becomes confused and this resets it. If this works, but you have to keep doing it to get heat, or if none of these procedures get your furnace up and running, unfortunately, you need to call a service tech. Moving on, here's a couple of do's and don'ts concerning forced air furnaces. Do have at least 3 furnace vents open all the time. I've seen people close off or cover up vents with rugs to try to divert heat to a particular section of their coach. This can overheat or damage your furnace. Don't set or lean anything near the furnace exhaust. Lawn chairs burn real good. Also, when backing into a campsite, make certain that the trees aren't up against the exhaust system. Now we'll move on to manual light furnaces. All manual light appliances have basically the same lighting procedure. First, make certain that the propane is turned on. I like to light the stove first to make sure there's no air in the lines and the propane system is okay. Next, go to your control panel and turn the knob to pilot. Having your lighter lit and ready, push the knob in and light the pilot light. Once lit, hold your finger on the knob for about 30 seconds and then release. If the pilot light stays lit, turn the knob to the on position and set your temperature. If the pilot light goes out, repeat the procedure. If you cannot get the pilot to stay lit after several tries, you have a problem and you need a service tech. Now let's check out air conditioning. There are even fewer owner serviceable parts on air conditioners. They run off AC power only, so you must be plugged in or be powered by your generator, and they have either manual controls or automatics. Most air conditioners have a thermostat on them. If we run only the fan on any speed, we circulate the air in the coach and the thermostat does nothing. But when we select cooling, the thermostat controls the temperature by turning on and off the compressor. The 4 most common problems I see with air conditioners are a blown circuit breaker, usually an easy fix, no hum, telling me that there is likely a control or a compressor problem, a hum and no cooling, telling me there is probably trouble in the air conditioner itself, or improper usage. I've seen people go golfing for the day and come back and their unit is 120 degrees inside and they expect the air conditioner to give them immediate relief. This is not realistic. If you're in a hot area and need cooling, start early in the day. Set the thermostat to some reasonable setting and allow the unit to maintain your coach. By reasonable, I mean don't expect to have one air conditioner maintain 65 degrees when it's 110 degrees outside. That would be hard to do, not to mention unhealthy for you. I personally like to use about a 10 to 15 degree difference between inside and out. Let's talk about manual controls. You might have 3 different fan speeds, and remember, on fan there's no cooling. The thermostat is not doing anything. When you select cooling, the thermostat will try to maintain the temperature you select. Remember, be reasonable. Oh, by the way, if you are on cooling and switch off, and then go right back to cooling and blow the circuit breaker, that's quite likely normal. You must always give the compressor time to bleed down the pressure before starting again, usually about 2 or 3 minutes. It takes a lot of power to start that compressor. Now, we can get heat from our air conditioners 2 ways. One is like this one, a heat strip. All it is a heating element inside the cowling. It looks a lot like a toaster element. Don't expect much from these. They're a great way to maintain heat in the coach, but on real cold days, you'll still have to use your furnace. Automatic air conditioners are the same as manual, except they work off wall thermostats. As you can see, the thermostats may look different, but their operations are quite similar. They control the furnace and the air conditioners. Well, that's about it for furnaces and air conditioning. As usual, if you have the manuals on any of these appliances, it's a good idea to sit down and read them.
Timmy, time to dump the holding tanks.
Yeah, I want it. No, dumping the tanks is not that big a deal. I always wear a pair of these disposable gloves, though, when I'm working around the sewer system. That's all. This is a very common waste system. It has a smaller valve we call the gray tank valve and a larger one we call the black tank valve. The larger one drains what Sherry calls the poopy tank. Treat this one with respect. The smaller one drains the shower water, bathroom, and kitchen sink. On some units, you might find there's a second small valve. This is for what they call the galley tank, or the second gray tank for the kitchen alone. The recommended procedure to drain the tanks are: remove the cover and couple the sewer hose to the fitting. Always drain the black tank first. This allows you to flush the hose out with the gray water when the black is done. Once the tanks are drained, remove the hose and replace the cap. If you're at an RV park and plan on staying for a while, you can leave the gray water open and allow it to drain continuously. Very, very important. You must never do that with the black tank. What happens is, when the toilet is flushed, the fluids go down the hose, but the solids stay behind in the tank. I've seen people do this, and believe me, the outcome is messy. We need the fluids to carry the solids out of the tank. If you have a black water flush feature like this one, they do a nice job of flushing out the tank, but always make sure that the black tank valve is open and the sewer hose is connected. The tanks can fill up real quick. If you don't have this feature, fill the tank with water and flush it out, or put a few gallons of water down the toilet and let it slosh around while you're traveling. This will break up the stuck solids a bit and make them easier to flush out. If you have to pull hard on either of these valves, you need to get them changed before they break. The chrome rod that goes into the valve is connected to a plastic knife-like device that slides to close the hole. If these two parts ever come apart, and they do quite frequently, you've just created a very messy job for someone and a large bill for yourself. When I get called out on these cases, I charge time and a half. It costs over $100 an hour to have me do the repairs, and the valve costs less than $10. This unit needs new valves. See how hard they are to operate? When the tanks are empty and you can't open and close them easily, have them changed. These are tank sensors that relay information to the monitor panel. The monitor is a type that registers 1/3, 2/3, and full. The power goes to the bottom probe, and when the fluid comes up and touches the second one, it gives a reading of 1/3 full on the panel. When the fluid gets to the third probe, it reads 2/3 full, and, of course, the final one reads full. I'm telling you this because if you don't clean the sensors once in a while in both tanks, you get a buildup of stuff on the sensors, and the panels will give you a false reading or read full all of the time. Remember the good old days? Waking up in the morning, running down to the creek and washing your face, wetting down your hair and brushing your teeth. Remember how good that cold water felt and how it woke you up? Don't you miss those days? Yeah, right. I don't. The water heater has made things so much more comfortable, and when they quit, we miss them. Unfortunately, there are very few customer serviceable parts on water heaters, but there are a couple of things you can do to get the best performance out of them. Water heaters have safety devices in them to protect us. As always, if anything goes bad on them, get professional help. And another thing, when lighting water heaters, make sure you're not directly in front of the burner tube. Yeah, I got a story for that too, but I'll save it for later. There's only two manufacturers of water heaters today. They are the Suburban and the Atwood, and both make manuals and automatics. If you look inside the door, you'll be able to tell which make you have. Let's start with the manual light models. The lighting procedures are very similar to the furnaces. Make sure that the propane is on. To light the pilot light, you should have a striker or lighter like this one. It makes lighting a lot easier. Always light the striker first. If your control looks like this one, turn the dial to pilot. Notice it's spring-loaded. Put the lighter into the burn tube and turn beyond the spring. When the pilot lights, remove the lighter and hold the pilot switch for about 30 seconds. Release the knob. If the pilot stays lit, turn the knob to the on position and the water heater will light. You can adjust the temperature with this lever. Notice it has a recommended setting to start with. If the pilot refuses to light the first time, try again. One way to tell if things are working correctly is the ease in which they light. If you have to try several times, it's telling you that you should have the water heater serviced. This is very important. These controls have what is called an emergency cutout, or an ECO. It's a protection device designed to shut down the water heater if the temperature goes to an unsafe level. It's built into the control, and if problems arise, say no water in the tank or the thermostat goes bad, it shuts down and will not light again. The entire control has to be replaced. Now let's move on to automatics, the DSI models, or direct spark ignition. These are very simple to operate. Make sure the propane is on and flip the switch. When you do, the light should come on. That's telling you that the process has begun. After a few seconds, the light will go out, and if the water heater fires and everything is okay, the light will stay off. When you flip the switch and the light doesn't come on, you may have a problem. Wait and listen to see if the water heater lights. If it does, the bulb in the switch might be burnt out. If it doesn't, check the fuses. That's about all you can do. If it's not a fuse, you'll need an RV tech. There's a little brain box or module in your water heater that controls everything. It also has a protection device called an ECO, or an emergency cutout switch. It will shut down the system if everything is not right. Most systems have what is called a one-try board. That means after one unsuccessful attempt at trying to light the water heater, it goes into standby mode and turns the light back on. You have to shut the switch off and then on again. If there's air in the lines, you might have to do this a few times. Again, these types of water heaters have safety devices in them, but they're not as radical as the manual type. If the water heater gets too hot, it will shut down, but after it cools down, you'll be able to relight it. The Atwood style will automatically reset itself when it cools down, but if you have the Suburban style, you'll need to push the button on this pad. There are two reset buttons, one for propane heat and the other for electric. If one pops, usually both go. Push both of them. If you feel or hear a click, the reset is complete. You can't adjust the thermostat on automatics. If you find you'd like to have the water a little hotter, you can have the thermostat changed, but this should be done by an RV tech. In the early years, the manufacturers put 140-degree thermostats in the water heaters, but I think some people were getting hurt with that hot of water. So they set them at 120 degrees and give the customer the option to increase it if they desired to do so. If you decide to have yours changed, be aware that the difference between 120 and 140 degrees, it doesn't sound like much, but it is. Be careful, especially if you have small children. If your water heater is equipped with an optional electric heater, you can save on propane and they're a lot quieter. Of course, you have to be plugged into power for them to work, and they can use as much as 13 amps of power to run, so you can't use them everywhere. Remember what we talked about in the electrical section? These have a separate element and thermostat, and you can increase the temperature on these ones too. Some RVs have a switch inside the coach to turn them on and off. They look like a regular light switch and usually are marked water heater, but they all have a small switch on the water heater itself. If you have both switches, they both have to be on for the electric water heater to work. Safety is always important. Of course, like I said, I have a story. I'm mobile, and for the best part, I work alone. One day I'm working on this real temperamental water heater, and the on-off switch is in the bathroom in the middle of the coach, and the water heater's on the other side of the entry door. I need to be close to this thing when it's turned on and off so I can hear and see what it's doing. I flagged down this young fella and asked him to run the switch while I listened and watched. I had him turn it on and off a few times, and I told him to wait. He didn't hear me, and of course, he turned on the switch about the same time I put my head down by the burner tube. This thing shot out about a 2-foot flame, knocked me on my butt. The one side of my face looked like I'd fallen asleep on the beach, and my hair and mustache looked as though I'd been dusting under the bed with my head. I was fine, but my barber never let me live it down. So be careful around exhaust tubes of water heaters and furnaces.
For you do-it-yourselfers, winterizing your own RV can save you some dollars, and it really isn't that tough. It'll help you become more familiar with the water system on your coach. The first step is to have some antifreeze and a hose. You can usually pick these items up at any RV store or dealer. The hose is about 3 to 4 feet in length. This fitting is just a plastic half-inch pipe thread on a right angle swivel. We usually use about 3 gallons of antifreeze when doing any size rig. The very first thing you must do is drain the water heater. For some reason, this is the most often forgotten item on a coach. Don't let this happen to you. This is what a water heater tank looks like when it freezes. This gentleman forgot to drain it, and his repair bill was about $550. To drain the water heater, you must make sure that it's turned off. If you have a manual light system, turn it off. Also, if you have an electric heater type, find the breaker and shut it off. If you don't, it'll burn out the element. You'll need a socket wrench to remove the drain plug. Remove the plug and set it inside the compartment so you know where it is next year. Locate the drain for the freshwater tank. Open it and leave it open. Don't close it or it may freeze. Next, find the water heater bypass. There are a few different styles, but if it looks like this, it's probably behind the water heater. The purpose of the bypass is to save on antifreeze. Without it, you would have to fill the entire water heater. That could be 6 to 10 gallons. If you study this picture, it'll show you how it works. In normal operation, the cold water goes in the bottom of the tank, the blue line, and the hot water comes out the top, the red line. If you shut the valve off on the bottom, the water can't get into the tank. If you shut the valve off on the top, nothing can get out. Now, if you open the valve in the middle, the water, or antifreeze, bypasses the water heater, thus the name. Pretty easy, huh? Normally, this style is found in motorhomes, and you might have to hunt a little to find it. They can put them in the darndest places. You simply turn the handle to bypass. Make sure to shut the water pump switch off. Next, locate the water pump. Make sure your freshwater tank is empty and undo the suction side of the pump. That is the line coming from the fresh tank. Attach the hose and put the other end all the way into the antifreeze jug. Check to make sure that all the taps and faucets are shut off, and then turn the water pump switch on. When you hear the pump running, open a tap and watch for the water to change color. When it does, shut that tap off and go to the next one. This is where common sense comes into effect. All RVs are set up a little differently. Think of where the water goes. Do you have a wash wand beside the toilet? Do you have an outside shower? How about an ice maker? Make certain that whatever has water going through it gets antifreeze. If you have one of these small water purifier faucets on your kitchen counter, there's usually an adapter or a bypass for them too. If you run antifreeze through the filter, you'll ruin it, and it also takes the dye out of the antifreeze, so you can't tell if it's protected or not. If you have low point drains on your unit, we suggest you open them. Some antifreeze will run out, but that's okay. At least we know there's no water in them. You should drain your holding tanks and leave the valves open, and that's about it. To dewinterize the coach, you simply reverse the steps, but in this order. And remember, do not open the water heater bypass at this time. First, close the fresh water tank. Close the low point drains. Close the sewer valves. Reattach the line to the water pump. Start to fill the holding tank with water. When the tank is full, start the pump and run fresh water through all lines, hot and cold, until you see clear water coming out of everything you winterized. While you're doing this, be aware and watch for leaks or anything that doesn't seem or sound right. Install the drain plug back into the water heater. Now we can reverse the bypass valve or valves and allow the hot water tank to fill. You'll have to open a hot water tap in order to get the air out of the tank. When the hot water tank is full and no more air comes from the tap, shut off all taps and light the heater and turn on the circuit breaker for the electric heater. The best water leak detector we've ever found is the water pump. Stop and listen. If the water pump continues to stay off and doesn't burp on and off or run continuously, then quite likely you're okay. Almost any major appliance you have in your home can be found in today's RVs. We've decided to concentrate on RV stoves and refrigerators, as the other appliances operate basically the same as your household ones do. Let's start with stoves.
Mama says I get to cook supper tonight, so I'm going to show you how to light the stove and the oven. Stovetops are very simple. First, if you have the sparker type, select the burner you want to light, turn it to high, and turn the sparker knob until it lights. If you don't have the sparker type, you must use a striker or lighter like this one. Make sure the lighter is lit before turning on the gas. As for ovens, there's no thermocouple like you would find on a water heater or furnace. As soon as you turn the knob to pilot, propane is escaping into the oven chamber. It's a very small amount, but make sure you have the striker lit beforehand. Turn the knob to pilot and light. Notice how small the flame is? Once the pilot is lit and you turn the temperature up, you'll see the pilot flame increase in size. This is warming what is called the safety valve and is normal. This may take a few seconds, but if all is well, the burner will light. That's it. Insert food and enjoy. There are only two manufacturers of RV refrigerators today, Norcold and Dometic. And apart from their appearance and their controls, they all work basically the same way. I'll spend a couple of minutes telling you how these great little appliances work. If you have a fridge problem while you're camping, this knowledge may help you do a temporary fix until you can get your tech to look at it. Unlike the fridge in your home, there's no Freon in RV fridges. They work on an evaporation principle and have liquid ammonia in them. Here's the backside of a Norcold refrigerator, and this is what we call a cooling unit. Liquid ammonia, which is naturally cold, is in these lines, and when we want cooling, we create heat, either from the flame, from propane, or a heating element from AC power, down in this part. The heat evaporates the ammonia in the tubes and sends it to the top. When it gets there, it condenses and starts to trickle down, cooling as it goes. When it gets to the bottom, it starts all over again, and that's all there is to it. Why am I telling you this? First, it might help you understand why it's so important to keep your RV as level as possible. If you don't, the ammonia won't be able to run back to the bottom and your fridge won't cool. Secondly, if you ever smell ammonia or see a yellow crusty stain under the burner tube at the back of the refrigerator, this indicates a leaking cooling unit and will have to be replaced. Let's start with Dometic controls. They are quite likely going to look like this or like this. The only difference is, on this one, you don't adjust the temperature. It's preset at the factory. We'll use this style to explain their operation. First, you must turn the fridge on and the display will light up. You have the option to run on auto or gas. Before I go any further, here's something you must keep in mind. Whether operating on AC or propane, your fridge still needs 12-volt battery power to run all the controls. Okay, if you select auto, the fridge will automatically look for AC power first, and if none is found, it will go to propane. So if you're at an RV park and have power, the fridge will use it. If the power goes out for some reason, it will automatically change to propane and protect the contents of your fridge. You can override the auto by going to gas. This uses only propane. You would do this if you were concerned about the cost of the power you're using or worried about drawing too much power and blowing breakers. The only problem with selecting gas is, if you run out of propane, the fridge quits cooling. I almost always have mine set on auto. Now Norcolds are exactly the same, except you can select auto, gas, which is LP, or AC. Like I said, how they look is the only difference. Now if your check light comes on either type of fridge, it's telling you that something is wrong. Your fridge is not cooling when this light is on. If this happens and you are on auto, shut the fridge off, turn it on again and wait. If the light comes back on, you have a problem. Switch to gas and turn the fridge off and on again. If the check light comes back on, you better start looking for a cooler and some ice. Something is wrong and you need to get help. It's not uncommon to have a problem with one function or the other, and the check light doesn't always come on. So if your fridge quits cooling, switch over to the other function and see what happens. This information is invaluable to your RV tech to help him quickly diagnose the problem. RV fridges are not frost-free. A little frost buildup on the inside is normal, especially if you're in a high humidity area or are opening and closing the door a lot. If neither of these situations apply to you and you're getting more than a little frost inside your fridge, perhaps the seal on the door isn't as tight as it should be. You can check this by performing the highly technical paper test. Now pay attention, this is complicated stuff. Not really. Just take an ordinary piece of paper and close it in the fridge door. Gently pull on it. If it slips out with very little or no resistance, you don't have a good enough seal and this can cause frost. Make sure to perform this test on all sides of the fridge. On the inside of the fridge, frost buildup is normal on the back, right-hand side. But if ice constantly builds up on the fins, you may not have a good enough seal on the cooling unit, in which case you'll need an RV tech to reseal it. RV fridges take longer to cool than your house fridge, so don't expect your favorite beverage to be frosty and cold an hour after you turn it on. On the other hand, once the fridge is cold, it's designed to stay cold for many hours. Also, if you have an ice maker, don't expect to make ice if you're running on propane. Ice makers only work on AC power. On some Norcold fridge panels, you'll notice a light with BAT printed on it. When lit, this is not telling you your fridge is running on battery. What it's telling you is, warning, your battery power is too low and the fridge cannot function properly. You need to rectify this by charging your batteries. That covers most of what I want to tell you about refrigerators. But here's a final tip. It is not recommended to travel with your LP on. In fact, it's illegal in some places. So shut your tanks off when going down the road. The reason for this is, if you were ever to have an accident or an upset, and your propane tanks were on, you could make a bad situation worse. Likewise, never refuel your RV with your fridge on. If it decides to light while you're fueling up, well, think about it. Remember, always safety first.
Gotcha! Get back to work.
I don't know about you, but I thought that was one of my better pieces. Seriously now, I can't think of a better way to mess up a perfectly great camping trip than to have your slide quit on you while you're packing up. They're the greatest things to have, but when they go bad, they'll drive you nuts, so you need to know what to do if yours quits. That's why you must know the emergency retract procedures for your unit. There's so many different types of slides and controls that it would take forever to explain each one. I'll give you the basics, but if you bought your RV from a dealer, get them to explain the procedures. If you bought yours privately, have someone like an RV tech show you how to do it. Also, ask them to show you where the fuses are and make sure you have extras. The fuses are usually not found in the fuse panel. Now, there are only 3 types of slide mechanisms I know of. First is the rack and pinion style, which is a long-toothed bar that is driven by a gear. Second is the worm gear type that telescopes in and out. The third is the hydraulic style that has a pump and rams. The rack and pinion style most of the time can be brought in manually by turning the bar or shaft like I'm doing here. Depending on how big your slide is, this can take some time and muscle. Pace yourself. The worm gear type usually comes with a crank, so make sure you have one and make certain it's the correct one for that unit. The hydraulic styles usually have the instructions printed on them, and it's a matter of turning some valves and using a hand pump. Like I said, get to know your unit. It's good advice on all aspects of your RV. Remember, the only dumb question is the one that's never asked.
Was that you?
No, I thought that was you.
No. It smells like...
Rotten eggs?
Yeah.
Yeah, they probably overfilled our propane tank again.
Yeah.
Nope. It wasn't either one of us, and I couldn't even blame the dog. It could have been overfilled propane tanks. You know that smell that comes from propane? Well, that's added. Propane in its natural state is odorless. I'm not sure if I have to tell you this, but if you ever smell that smell, do something about it. Put out all open flame, cigarettes, and so on. Shut the tanks off and get someone qualified to check it out. All bottles and tanks have to be certified, and it depends on where you live or where you go as to how often this has to be done. Keep your tanks certified. I know it's a nuisance and it can be expensive, but so are funerals. Remember, safety first. All propane tanks are not supposed to be filled over 80%. For a few reasons. First, it's the law. Second, it allows the gas to expand when the temperature changes. But here's one that you very seldom hear of. Propane has oil in it, and when you overfill the tanks, you get oil in the system, and the oil will plug the lines and shut down your appliances. No kidding, Tim sees about 20 of these a year. So now we're going to take you through the most common propane systems, starting with motorhomes.
Most motorhome propane tanks are attached or fixed to the unit. This is a good example of one. In an order of appearance, left to right, we have the mechanical dial-type fuel gauge. This is the electrical connection, which allows us to read the fuel level on the monitor panel inside the coach. Under here is the regulator and the hose that feeds the system. When the attendants fill these tanks or service work is done, they are supposed to shut these valves off. Sometimes, though, they forget to open them when they are done. So if you get in and find your gas appliances aren't working, come out and check this valve. This is good to know. The tank here is very similar to the other one, except that it has an electronic shutdown valve that is controlled by the LP detector. If the LP detector senses propane in the coach and sounds off, it will shut down the entire coach. We don't see these units much anymore, but they are still out there. LP sensors are sensitive to hairsprays, certain cooking odors, pet hair, and so on. While we are on the subject, here are a few more LP detectors. If they start going off for no apparent reason, you should have a gas test done by a repair facility, and if necessary, have it changed. There are many misconceptions on how an auto changeover regulator works. The purpose of these devices are to give an uninterrupted supply of propane to your RV, so for instance, you don't have to get up in the middle of the night to get your furnace going. There are many different types and shapes like these ones, but they basically work the same. You must have both bottles open, and the arrow or lever indicates which tank you are pulling out of. When the tank you are using is done, the indicator turns to another color, like this one turns red, telling you it's time to go to town and buy some propane. First step is to change the arrow or pointer to the full tank. Notice the indicator changes back to green, telling us that this tank has propane in it and we are now using it. Next, shut off the empty tank and remove the hose connections. Remember, if you have the old style connectors, you need a 7/8 inch wrench and they have reverse threads. This means you would have to turn it clockwise rather than anti-clockwise to remove it. Otherwise, just turn the green fittings off like normal and install the safety plugs into the tanks. This keeps the dirt and miscellaneous particles out of the fittings. Remove the tank and have it refilled. When you get back, install the full tank in the reverse order and leave the arrow or pointer where you left it. When that tank is empty, you just do it all again.
Here's just a few final tips we want to pass on to you. Some of these have been covered in the video, but for safety purposes, we thought they should be repeated.
Hey, you know what? I got a little...
No more songs.
Oh, come on, you guys. You're stifling my creativity.
Anyway, first of all, don't clutter up your awning with a bunch of decorations and jewelry. It just makes it more difficult to retract in the event of a high wind or an emergency.
And don't cover up your furnace vents to redirect heat. And don't store anything in front of the exhaust vents of your water heater and your furnace.
Never fuel up your vehicle with your fridge on, and make sure you shut your propane off while you're traveling.
And always have your striker lit before lighting any of your appliances.
Do a really thorough walk-around check of your RV before you hit the road, both inside and out. Make sure the antenna and satellite are down, kick your tires, close vents and windows, and so on. Don't drive away while you're still plugged in.
Yeah, we know about that one, don't we? We didn't cover this, but if you're pulling a trailer, you probably have a breakaway switch. It's designed to apply the brakes in the event that your tow vehicle and your RV ever become separated while traveling. Make certain that the lanyard is plugged in and the other end is fastened to the tow vehicle. You should never unplug this for any reason, so always check this before you drive away.
Also, if you have a pull-type RV, you should always have your brakes and wheel bearings checked every 2 years or 12,000 miles, whichever comes first.
And finally, don't forget to pack your RV walkthrough and check our website for other information coming your way.